The most dangerous part isn't even spending years giving your heart to people who never truly valued it. People think the worst thing is the pain. They think the deepest wound comes from abandonment, manipulation, rejection, or emotional exhaustion. But they are wrong. The true horror begins when someone spends so long carrying the emotions of others that they forget where other people end and where they begin. Because once that happens, they stop living their own life. They become a container for everyone else's chaos, a refuge for wounded souls, a silent guardian of emotional storms. And somewhere in the darkness, while they are saving everyone else, they disappear. Yet hidden among empaths exists a rarer phenomenon, a personality so deeply intuitive, so psychologically aware, so profoundly sensitive to truth that even they struggle to understand themselves. Some call them highly sensitive, others call them old souls. But throughout countless stories, psychological observations, and transformational journeys, they have become known by another name: the Indigo Empath. Not because of mysticism, not because of fantasy, but because they seem to carry an unusual awareness that allows them to see beneath masks, beneath manipulation, beneath social performance, and directly into the emotional architecture of human behavior. And if you recognize these 7 signs inside yourself, it may explain why your entire life has felt different, why crowds exhaust you, why betrayal cuts deeper, why you often feel alone even when surrounded by people, and why your greatest weakness may secretly be your greatest source of power. Stay with me. Because what happens next changes everything. Psychological researchers have long observed that certain individuals possess an unusually heightened sensitivity to emotional signals. According to Jungian psychology, human beings constantly project hidden aspects of themselves onto others. Most people only notice the words. The indigo empath notices the contradiction, the hesitation, the emotional leakage, the micro-expression, the subtle fracture between what is said and what is felt. This is why many indigo empaths grow up feeling different, not superior, different. They often sense tensions others ignore. They feel emotional undercurrents before anyone speaks. They walk into a room and immediately recognize energies that others take weeks to discover. Carl Jung described the psyche as constantly seeking equilibrium. What appears hidden eventually seeks expression. What is denied eventually demands recognition. And the indigo empath often becomes the unwilling witness to these hidden truths. The first sign of an indigo empath is an almost painful sensitivity to emotional authenticity. They are not impressed by appearances. Status rarely moves them. Titles mean little. Charm alone cannot fool them. Something inside them is constantly scanning for congruence. Their intuition works like a silent radar. When someone says, "I'm fine," but secretly feels devastated, the indigo empath feels the distortion. When someone pretends to love but secretly seeks control, the signal changes. When someone wears confidence like armor to conceal insecurity, the empath senses the fracture underneath. This gift often becomes a burden, because seeing truth means losing the luxury of illusion. Imagine living inside a world where masks glow brighter than faces. That is often what life feels like for them. Every interaction becomes a puzzle. Every relationship becomes an investigation. Every smile contains hidden information. And over time, this constant awareness becomes exhausting. The second sign is lifelong emotional absorption. The indigo empath does not simply understand pain. They absorb it. They become a sponge for suffering, a vessel for burdens that were never theirs to carry. Friends call them during crises. Family members unload their emotional chaos. Partners lean on them for stability. Strangers confess secrets within minutes of meeting them. At first, this feels meaningful, purposeful, even sacred. But eventually, something changes. Because every sponge has a limit. Every well can run dry. And every bridge can only support so much weight before it begins to crack. For years they give. For years they forgive. For years they rescue. Yet many discover a devastating truth. The people who need them most are not always the people who value them most. So they continue pouring themselves into a bottomless well, and the well never fills. The third sign is an unusual relationship with solitude. Most people fear being alone. The indigo empath fears losing themselves in noise. there is a difference. Because solitude does not feel like punishment to them, it feels like oxygen. The outside world often overwhelms their nervous system. Too many expectations, too many emotional demands, too many performances, too many people pretending. And so they retreat, not because they hate humanity, but because they need silence to hear themselves again. A forest path, a late night drive, a quiet room. These become places of restoration, places where fragmented pieces of identity return home. To outsiders, this withdrawal can appear mysterious, but internally, it serves a critical function. It protects the self from disappearing beneath the weight of everyone else's expectations. Like a house finally securing its doors after years of leaving them open, solitude becomes protection, not isolation. Protection. The fourth sign is a relentless hunger for truth. The indigo empath cannot comfortably live inside a lie, even when the truth hurts, even when it destroys relationships, even when it demands radical change. They feel compelled toward authenticity. This often creates conflict because most social systems are built upon small illusions. People hide motives, hide fears, hide insecurities, hide intentions. But the indigo empath feels drawn toward what exists beneath the surface. This can make them intimidating, not because they seek power, but because their presence quietly exposes what others try to conceal. Some individuals become uncomfortable around them without knowing why. Others become defensive. Others project. Jung described projection as seeing disowned parts of ourselves in someone else. The indigo empath becomes a mirror, and mirrors are rarely welcomed by people who fear what they might see. The fifth sign emerges after years of suffering. This is where the story becomes darker and far more powerful. For a long time, the indigo empath survives through self-abandonment. They suppress anger, suppress needs, suppress boundaries, suppress disappointment. They become experts at understanding everyone except themselves. They build bridges for people who only burn them. They offer loyalty to those who offer convenience. They give understanding to people who never attempt to understand them. And then one day, something happens, not externally, internally, a quiet click, a silent shift, no screaming, no revenge, no dramatic confrontation, just a single moment, a lock turning, a receiver shutting off, a bridge collapsing into darkness without making a sound. This is the breaking point, and it terrifies those who never saw it coming. Because the indigo empath does not explode, they disappear emotionally. The signal vanishes, the access expires, the endless forgiveness ends forever. Those around them often assume they will return. After all, they always have. But this time is different. This time something fundamental has changed. This time the door seals shut, and behind that door waits the sixth sign, shadow integration. Many people misunderstand what happens next. They believe the indigo empath becomes cold, bitter, cruel, detached. But psychologically, something much deeper is occurring. Jung believed that rejected aspects of the personality eventually seek integration. What we suppress does not disappear. It waits. The anger, the strength, the assertiveness, the capacity to say no, the willingness to walk away. These traits have often been buried beneath years of self-sacrifice. Now they begin to return, not as destruction, as completion. The indigo empath starts meeting the parts of themselves they abandoned long ago. The protector, the warrior, the boundary setter, the truth speaker, the survivor. For years, these traits remained locked behind emotional chains. Now those chains break, like a severed leash falling to the ground, like fortress walls rising after decades of invasion, like emotional armor forged in fire. The transformation begins, and something remarkable happens. The very qualities they once feared become the qualities that save them. Their anger becomes discernment. Their boundaries become self-respect. Their solitude becomes wisdom. Their intuition becomes guidance. They did not become cold. They became complete. This is where manipulators lose power, and they lose it fast. Because manipulation depends on emotional access. It requires hooks, leverage, open wounds, unresolved guilt, unhealed fears. But the indigo empath who has integrated their shadow becomes extraordinarily difficult to control. Suddenly, guilt stops working. Apologies feel empty. Love bombing becomes transparent. False promises become obvious. Emotional bait loses its attraction. The manipulator becomes confused, then frustrated, then desperate, because their old strategies no longer produce results. Imagine a fisherman returning to the same lake every day only to discover the fish are gone. The bait remains, the techniques remain, the effort remains, but the response never comes. That is what emotional sovereignty feels like to someone who once controlled you. The signal has been extinguished, the hooks have dissolved, the game has ended, and perhaps the most disturbing part for them is how calm you become. No arguments, no explanations, no emotional storms, just silence, steady, unmovable, unreachable. The seventh and final sign is psychological immunity. This is the stage few people ever reach, and fewer still understand. At this point, the indigo empath stops seeking permission to exist. They stop negotiating their worth. They stop defending every decision. They stop explaining boundaries to people committed to violating them. Something inside settles. The nervous system softens. The mind clears. The soul stops running. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming fully oneself, not the self others demanded, not the self trauma created, not the self-manipulation designed, the true self, the integrated self, the sovereign self. There is an extraordinary stillness here, not passivity, power, not withdrawal, mastery, not emotional numbness, clarity. Imagine a mountain standing through centuries of storms. The weather changes, the mountain remains. That is psychological immunity. The indigo empath begins recognizing a profound truth. Not everyone deserves access. Not everyone deserves explanation. Not everyone deserves another chance. Compassion remains. But discernment leads. Kindness remains. But boundaries protect it. Love remains. But self-respect decides where it flows. This final evolution is often mistaken for indifference, yet true indifference is not hatred. Hatred still cares. Hatred still reacts. Hatred still grants energy to the object of attention. The indigo empath eventually transcends that. They stop hoping toxic people will change. They stop waiting for apologies. They stop seeking validation from emotionally unavailable individuals. They stop chasing closure from those incapable of providing it. And in that moment, freedom arrives, quietly, completely, like dawn spreading across a landscape after an endless night. The old emotional chains fall away, the old wounds lose authority, the old stories lose their grip, and those who once depended upon controlling them suddenly discover there is nothing left to control. No hooks, no leverage, no access, only distance, only boundaries, only peace. The greatest irony is that the indigo empath was never meant to become someone else. The journey was never about becoming stronger than everyone around them. It was about becoming whole. The sensitivity that once felt like a curse becomes wisdom. The pain that once felt meaningless becomes instruction. The solitude that once felt lonely becomes sacred. The suffering that once felt endless becomes the fire that forged a new identity. And perhaps that is the hidden truth most people never understand. The indigo empath was never weak. They were simply carrying too much that never belonged to them. The moment they put it down, their true power appeared. Not loud, not aggressive, not theatrical, just undeniable. Because the strongest souls are rarely the ones who dominate rooms. They are the ones who no longer need the room's approval. The most evolved individuals are not those who control others. They are those who finally control themselves. And when the indigo empath reaches that place, something beautiful happens. The search ends. The chasing ends. The proving ends. The waiting ends. They stop asking the world who they are and begin telling the world who they have become. They are no longer rescuing everyone, no longer abandoning themselves, no longer shrinking to fit inside someone else's comfort. They stand fully present, fully aware, fully sovereign. And the silence you hear is not emptiness. It is the sound of illusions collapsing, the sound of old wounds losing power, the sound of a soul remembering its own name, because they were never losing themselves. They were finding themselves, and they are no longer waiting to be chosen. They have already chosen themselves.